Hey, if you want access to the transcripts, the show notes, and the links talked about as part of this episode, you can head to Seven, so the word all spelled out, SEVEN health.com/338. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel. I'm a nutritionist and a coach and an eating disorder expert, and I help people to fully recover. So before we get on with today's show, I just want to say that I'm currently taking on clients. If you are living with an eating disorder and you would like to fully recover, irrespective of how long this has been going on, whether it's something that's developed in the last year, whether it's been going on for multiple decades, I would love to help. And I know for some people that the idea of full recovery can feel this very distant thing that feels so out of reach. Any part of you that thinks, okay, this could be a possibility, then please get in contact. I truly believe that everyone can fully recover. They just need to do the things to help them get there. And this is what I work on with people. And so if this is where you would like to get to, please get in contact. You can send an email to info@7-health.com and just put coaching in the subject line, and then I can send over the details. So on with today's show. So this one, we are going to be talking about going all in and all in with recovery. And this is something that it's come up a lot more recently in the group that I manage and with one-on-one clients. I know it's a topic that I've covered at various points with guests on the show, but I've never really done a solo episode on it. So I wanted to, use this time to go through it and to really give an honest overview of this in terms of what is going all in, when can it be helpful, what doesn't it help with, and sharing information connected to this. And when I think about this idea of going in, it's become very popular. I feel like maybe 10 years ago it was this very niche idea, whereas more recently it feels like it's hit more of the mainstream, and I see more and more people talking about it. I associate it with people like Tabitha Farrar and Kayla Rose Katecki and Becky Freestone. It's not that they're the only ones talking about this. They're just people who are in my sphere and people that I know of and have had on the show. And so I think about them. I also think about within a lot of the HA, the hypothalamic amenorrhea recovery space, going all in is something that comes up a lot within that. And so what do we actually mean with going all in? And look, I know that there can be lots of different definitions connected to this, and that often when people talk about I'm going all in, that they have their own definition of what this looks like. So let me just give the sort of broad idea of what this means. And so going all in means no restrictions at all connected to food. So it's not just about I'm going to eat more. It's really completely removing any limitations around types of foods or timings of foods or quantity of food. So if you've eaten and you're hungry, 20 minutes later, you eat again. If you're thinking about food, you eat again. And as part of that, it's responding not just to physical hunger, but mental hunger. So eating even when you're not physically hungry, but because there is a mental preoccupation with food, or you start thinking about food. Basically, any kind of food thought is a indication that I need to go and eat something. There is then no compensatory movement connected to this, or no compensation at all in any other ways. And so rest is very much prioritized as part of this. Even say completely giving up exercise, whether that is for a very short amount of time or for a longer amount of time, but we're having a cessation in terms of exercise and movement. And I say exercise and movement because this also includes, hey, I'm not going to just stop the running and the swimming and that kind of stuff. I'm also not going to be doing my walks. I'm also not going to be doing the cleaning around the house. Like I'm going to do as little actual movement as humanly possible, because that's then what is required, or that's what is part of this approach. There is an acceptance of weight gain, and not just tolerating it, but really being willing to gain as much as the body needs to as part of this, even if this is leading to a weight overshoot, or even if this is leading to changes outside what is considered normal or acceptable. It's really leaning into this. And I know that with this part, it's not that someone feels like this all of the time. There can be ups and downs. There can be times of feeling very strong in the I will do whatever I need to, irrespective of what happens. And then there can be moments of where there is a lot of grief connected to this. There can be a lot of uncertainty, but it's continuing to, I'm going to keep doing this no matter what comes up. So I think I just want to be careful with the word acceptance here, because I don't think it's this unwavering acceptance in the way that people think about it. The acceptance piece is more about, I'm going to continue doing the things that I need to as part of this, irrespective of how I'm feeling in the moment. There's really a focus on recovery over control. So removing the control around how the body looks and shifting it to really just doing the things that will help it physically recover in the quickest possible time. And that's why there's no upper limit in terms of the eating. That's why, hey, we're completely resting, because we're trying to do things that lead to the quickest physical recovery that can possibly happen. And connected to all this is this very cold turkey mindset. So for many people with going all in, it's not that, I gradually build my way up there. It's jumping in headfirst all at once. I'm on day one, I'm stopping my exercise, I'm eating more, I'm doing all of the things. And I will just say, like, in my experience with people who've gone all in, yes, that can be the case. And there's lots of times where I'm working with clients and it's after 3 months or 6 months, or at some point of doing the more gradual approach or a more structured approach, there's this realization of, hey, I just realized I need to and want to rip the Band-Aid off of this. I just want to go headfirst into it. And so it's not that they needed to do that to get into all in, and that's not part of the sort of all in philosophy or what you have to do. But we could say that there's this delineation between, hey, I was doing recovery in this other way to start with, and now from this point on, now I've gone all in. And the other piece I would say connected to this and is that there's a lot of people where they do the all in, where they're doing this of their own accord. They're doing it outside of professional help. And for a lot of people, they've tried different approaches. They've done inpatient or they've done outpatient and done all these different approaches, and it just hasn't really worked. And from watching videos online, from listening to podcasts, from following certain people, there's then this decision of, hey, all in is the one thing I haven't tried, and I'm going to start doing this. And they realize, hey, in all of the other approaches, we were going too slowly with it, or I wasn't the one who was making the choices. Like, yes, I did eat more while I was in inpatient, but I was never the one who was preparing those meals. Or yes, I saw that therapist for ages, but we weren't actually doing anything connected to making changes. There was a lot of reflective work on childhood or whatever it may be. And so just realizing, hey, this is the thing that I haven't actually done before, and I want to lean into this. And I would say for many of the people that I work with going all in, this is what they've done in terms of they started going all in of their own accord. And it might be, I've been doing this for 3 weeks, I've been doing this for 6 weeks, I've been doing this for a couple of months. It's at that point that they then reach out. And it's usually that I've been doing this for a while, I've noticed some changes, there's some positives with this, there's some challenges with this, and I recognize that I don't want to do this just on my own. It's too much for me to do this on my own. Or I've tried this approach on my own before, and I realized that I came unstuck at some point. And so I want your help to continue doing this. And yes, I will keep doing the all-in piece, but I want your help to help me continue to do that, but also to look at all of the other components that are connected to recovery and why I developed this eating disorder in the first place. And I want to just say, like, where I think going all in can be helpful, because I do think that there are lots of benefits to this approach. And so the number one reason why I think it's so useful is it really helps to restore the physiology. It helps to deal with the energy debt that accrues as part of living with an eating disorder. So eating disorders, and I've said this many times before, are biopsychosocial, meaning there is a biological component, there is a psychological component, there's a socialization component, and a lot of these things are interconnected, because if you're in a low energy state, that has an impact on your psychology. But so much of the symptoms that are connected with an eating disorder, whether that be physical symptoms or mental emotional symptoms, are being driven by the state that the body's in and the energy debt that has accrued because of the restriction that happens with all eating disorders. And so the benefit of this approach is we are starting to deal with the physical pieces of the eating disorder much more quickly. The body and brain can start to repair much more quickly than if we're taking this very slow and steady approach. It means that there's a repair in metabolism and metabolic function, in hormones, in neurological damage that has occurred. Like it just allows the body to physically heal at a much more rapid rate. Standpoint, it removes so much of the ambiguity. There's no more of the, am I allowed to eat this? Is this too much? And so there can be this real relief because there's just this clarity. And if I've just spent so many years overthinking it, if I've been trying to make changes that are trying to appease the eating disorder and essentially asking like, is this okay with you? And the eating disorder says no. And so I try and make another change that maybe the eating disorder is okay with. We're just not even going into that realm. And we're just going headfirst into these are the things that are going to be most pro-recovery. And I think that can be very helpful because it gets rid of all of the ambiguity and the unsureness around it, because it's just, okay, there is no upper limit. The goal is to really be eating and resting. And by doing this, I think it starts to rebuild trust a lot quicker, because there can be this feeling of I really don't trust my body, and there can be lots of reasons for that, but a lot of that is again because of the state that the body's in, and so you're not getting great feedback in terms of hunger and fullness and different signals. And so by being able to bring in all of this energy in a very short amount of time, it allows the body to upregulate and repair. And so you start to be able to notice hunger and fullness signals better. You're responding to your hunger better. You're responding to your fatigue better by resting. You're allowing yourself to experience pleasure again, whether that be pleasure from eating, whether that be pleasure in other ways from seeing people or doing other things. And so it really helps someone to reconnect to all of those body signals. And this has such a knock-on effect by being able to do that in a very quick manner. It also can lead to a lot of momentum, because the rapid changes, even though people think these are going to be scary, they can create this real snowball effect. And so I'm eating more, and so I now start to have better brain function, which means that I'm better able to emotionally regulate, which then supports me taking even more recovery-aligned actions. It then allows me to start to see friends more when previously I was isolating. I'm starting to do things that are bringing more joy and fun. And so you can have this real cascade effect where so often when we're doing recovery in this very slow way, there can be this leap of faith of I'm doing these things. Everyone tells me there's this upside from doing them. I haven't noticed it yet, but I'm going to keep going and eventually it's going to become apparent to me. Whereas with this approach, even though there can be uncomfortableness, even though there can be challenges with it, you can start to very quickly see improvements. And that can be improvements in terms of the quality of your life. It can be improvements in terms of physical symptoms, mental symptoms, emotional symptoms. I mean, as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking of a particular client at the moment who I started with maybe 3 months ago, and she had gone all in a handful of weeks before we started together. And in a very short amount of time, like her life transformed in terms of being really isolated, not doing very much with her life, to seeing people, going out, just getting her old self back. And it's not that there aren't challenges. We're not still working on certain things connected to it, but it is really sort of night and day where she is now compared to where she was a few months ago. And again, I think that can then continue to build momentum and really allow you to see, like, this is the thing that I need to do. This is the way that I support my body. And the final piece I would just say with this is it really challenges the eating disorder and does that in a very head-on way. And I think about eating disorders as being anxiety disorders and disorders of avoidance. Like, so much of what the eating disorder is doing is allowing you to avoid certain thoughts or feelings or sensations or events or situations. And those things will come up again and again and again, but I get this temporary relief and a temporary way of avoiding them by doing the eating disorder behaviors. And what recovery is about is action taking. It's the opposite of avoidance. It's doing the things that are scary. And what going all in does for you is, in a very short amount of time, you are dealing with many of the things that you've been avoiding. And again, that can be so beneficial in terms of starting to understand, like, oh, actually, I can do that thing. Or, yeah, that was uncomfortable and I survived it. And realizing I can tolerate a lot of the things that I didn't think I would be able to tolerate. And again, doing that in a very short amount of time, where it might take someone a year to get to that place when they're doing it in this slow and steady way, versus, hey, within a matter of months, I've learned so much by taking this approach. And I think, again, kind of just touching on what I'd said before, I think there can just be this real relief that I'm now not spending my whole day just negotiating with the eating disorder, and I'm not bargaining with it. I'm just getting on with things. And I know the things that I need to do as part of recovery, and I'm just going forward with those. The incorrect beliefs that I see about all in and the reason why I shouldn't be going all in is the fear around things changing too quickly or too fast. So it's going to be too much food, or it's going to be too many new foods, or the weight gain is going to be too quickly. And there's this idea that if I go slow and steady, then it will feel more manageable and I can consistently be getting okay with things, and then I'll gradually increase it again, and then I get okay with it and I gradually increase again. And the reality is, I just haven't seen this to be true with people. I've had people who do things in a slow and steady way where it still feels too overwhelming and too much. And I think there's this mistaken belief that if I go slower and this thing is smaller than in terms of how my nervous system reacts and how it feels to me, it's going to feel easier. And I don't believe that to be true based on the clients that I've worked with. And really, one of the biggest fears with this is I don't know where this is going to end up. I think people feel like the fear is, that it's going to be too quick and too soon and all of those things. But actually the fear is, I don't know where this is going to end up. And actually what happens by going all is you get to start to discover that a lot more quickly than if you're going at it in a very slow approach. And really, if I look at where do people come unstuck with recovery, yes, it is from their going too slow and not making meaningful changes. But two, it's really like when you start believing the eating disorder thoughts and all of the what if thinking and all of the fears and those types of things. And this can happen with someone going all in. At some point, there's the worry of, but what's going to happen with my weight after this point, or when is this going to end? And you start to get hooked by those thoughts and you start to pull back, and that's where things start to unravel. But I equally see the same thing happening even when someone's recovery is going in the most perfect way, in terms of I'm making this change and it's leading to this slow increase, and I'm making this other change and it's leading to this slow increase. Like, it feels like that should be the golden ticket, and it just really doesn't. And the other piece I find that comes up a lot, especially when people are trying to do this in this very slow and steady way, is they're wanting to really understand how this works. So if I reduce my exercise by this amount, what's going to happen on the scale? If I increase my eating by this amount, what's going to happen? And I'm trying to understand that X amount of calories leads to this amount of weight gain, or this amount of reduction in exercise leads to this amount of weight gain. And the reality is, it just doesn't work in this very linear fashion. And people then get really hooked by this, hey, it's not making sense to me. This week I feel like I didn't make much of a change, and yet something really jumped up. And the thing with going all in is you're just not getting into that line of thinking. It's, hey, I'm just doing everything in my power to heal as quickly as possible. And if the weight's going on quickly, the weight's going on quickly. If it's going on slower than I expected, it's going on slower than I expected. But I'm not trying to understand this somewhat impossible riddle where it is highly logical and bodies change in not in a consistent way, especially in the early stages of recovery. And so I'm saying all this because I think there can be a lot of a block towards people going in this approach, and the block isn't connected to reality. And I'm going to go through certain bits where and reasons why I don't think that all in helps in certain situations, or it actually doesn't repair this piece. And so I want to talk about that, but I think there can be some incorrect beliefs around why this shouldn't be the right approach. And so then looking at the limitations of all in. And I think this is an important piece to go through because I don't see a lot of people talking about this when they are talking about all in. I think it is either just vilified as no one should do it, it's too quick, it's too overwhelming, it's not the right approach, or this is just the most incredible thing, everyone needs to be doing it. And so let me just share like the limitations that I see with all in, and this is based on from working with lots of clients and seeing people who have done it, people who haven't done it, and just understanding the complexity connected to eating disorders. And so the first thing I will say is that I believe that all in can be oversold in what it does. And yes, it can help in terms of recovery and the physical recovery of the body. But where it doesn't necessarily help is with things that predate the eating disorder, or where things that have happened outside of the eating disorder. So for many clients I work with, they had long-standing body image problems well before they developed an eating disorder. There are clients that I work with who had body dysmorphia before developing an eating disorder. There are clients who have lots of trauma that has occurred throughout their life. There are clients who are neurodivergent, whether they're ADHD or autism spectrum disorder or high sensitivity. All of these things are separate from the eating disorder. And I think what can often happen is it's really oversold of like, if you go all in, like everything will be repaired. And what I often see for the people who have just really incredible turnarounds from going all in, and this isn't always the case, but it is often the case that for that person, so much of what the eating disorder about for them was just purely biological. For some of them, it was just dumb luck that they went on a diet and then they found themselves in this position. They didn't have body image issues before all this started. They weren't growing up in a household where people were fat phobic and make comments about people's body. There wasn't dieting going on in their household. Before they went on their first diet, they kind of lived very much outside of diet culture in so many ways, in terms of it just wasn't affecting them. And so for that person, when they develop an eating disorder, yes, all in really does help them, because we're then dealing with the biological component really quickly. And that was pretty much it, or a very big component of what was going on. And so that is where someone can feel like, this is just the be all and end all. This is the only thing that someone needs to do because that was their experience. And so I want to really just highlight this. And again, this isn't to say that all in isn't the right approach for someone who has had trauma or has body image issues that predate the eating disorder or is neurodivergent. Like it can still work. It's just we need to go in managing expectations of what this thing does and doesn't do. And I think that there can be this promise that people have, and this can be either an unspoken promise or it can be a very explicit promise of this will bring really quick healing and really quick peace for you. And when there is then still challenges and emotional upheaval and all of these things, people can get very disillusioned. And it can feel like, I did all of this and I still feel awful. Recovery doesn't work. Like I feel so angry that now I'm living in this bigger body and it hasn't translated into me feeling the way that I've been sold that I'm going to feel. The next limitation I see with it is that we need more than just food and stopping exercise as part of recovery. For so much of what I work on with people, like, yes, there is the biological or physiological component, but we need to learn other coping skills. Like, this isn't just all about being in energy debt. And again, I think if this approach is done just in and of itself, and this is the only thing that you need, or that's what someone is told, then we're not really looking at the other things that are really important. And especially if you've lived with an eating disorder for 5 years, 10 years, multiple decades, what the eating disorder has become is a way of coping. And I said earlier, eating disorders are about avoidance. And so it means that anytime there's been a challenge, hey, I just use the eating disorder. And so this means that we haven't learned other ways of being able to cope. And there are going to be lots of things that then come up when we start to go all in. Like, yes, there are going to be changes from a physical standpoint, but then there's also going to be stuff connected to life, stuff connected to kids or partner or work or all of these different things. And if the eating disorder was my only way of coping before, and now I've removed that, I'm going to feel pretty raw and exposed and vulnerable. And so again, it's not that all in can't help, but it needs to be then done alongside these other things that is allowing someone to have tools to deal with distress, or when panic comes up, or when there's grief, or there's shame, or all of these different things that are part of being a human being and are unavoidable and are going to happen in a high concentration when you're going through recovery. To say that I don't think that going all in is always accessible for everyone. So someone may be a caregiver, they may be working full time, they may be dealing with other co-occurring conditions. And if we're looking about the way that all in is often talked about, where if you ever think about food, you need to go and get something to eat. Like, I just don't think that is realistic for everyone from a logical, practical standpoint, but even just from an emotional, feeling safe standpoint. And so again, it's not that we can't make big changes. We can, but it might be, hey, we need to do this in a more structured way for it to actually fit in with the life that you have and the challenges that are part and parcel of that. And I think as well, within some online spaces where all in is talked about, you can get into this very all or nothing thinking and it become very echo chambery, not a lot of nuance, and this idea of if you're not eating 5,000 calories a day and never exercising, you're not doing recovery. And I think it becomes this very black and white thing. And I don't think that is helpful for anyone. The other issue that I see with this, and this is less about a limitation with going all in and more how I see the eating disorder using this. So there can be this feeling of, hey, I just want total freedom. I really just want to be able to completely release the reins. I just don't want to have food taking so much of my space in my mind and in my day. And so I really want to go all in. And that's why I'm not going to follow a meal plan. It's why I'm not going to follow any structure. I'm just going to allow myself to eat whenever I want to eat, and I'm going to go all in. But then when someone gets to mealtime and snack time and at various points throughout the day, they just feel overwhelmed. They're paralyzed. There's this indecision. It just creeps in. It could be it's mealtime. It could be it's snack time. It could be I'm noticing I'm hungry, and yet I'm now panicked and I don't know what to do. And what then happens is I have a resistance to following any kind of structure because I want to go all in, but yet I'm actually not really making any changes. And so I've seen this happen for many people where there's a reluctance to create any kind of structure. There's a reluctance to be saying, okay, I'm going to be increasing my breakfast or my lunch by this amount because let me just get there and I'll see what I want when I get there, and let me lean into my body body and what are my cravings and all of that. And it's just the eating disorder in disguise and the eating disorder using this against someone. And so in these situations, it really is, hey, you need to have structure first. And this is the case. Like if someone comes to me and they're already doing all in and they've really proven that they're able to do that, great. But if I'm working with someone and they're saying, hey, I want to do this, my way of approaching it, especially in the beginning, is I want you to prove that you can do this. So to begin with, we are going to up your baseline. We're still going to have your structure. We're still doing 3 meals, 3 snacks a day. We're going to increase them so that they are at a much higher level. And if you want to eat over and above them, if you want to be adding in another snack, if you want to be having more, like, go for it. But this needs to be the minimum. And I do that because that then protects someone. And what I find most of the time is that people then just stay with the plan. Maybe they have a moment of going a little bit higher, but they don't typically go higher. And I don't think that is because, they then are just sticking to the structure. My belief, and I've tried this with many people, is then when we remove the structure, everything falls by the wayside. So it's, in a sense, from my perspective, you need to prove that you can go all in first with a structure in place as a minimum. And if you prove that you can do it, then great. But let's not remove the structure until that is actually happening. And so then the question, like, do I do all in with all clients? And the answer is no, I don't do all in with all clients. And if I'm thinking about what percentage it happens, I would probably say maybe 10, maybe 15%. And so most of the time, I'm not doing this with people. And for the people that I do it with, as I said earlier on, most of the time they're already doing it when they approach me. So they've already started doing this, and then they're wanting to have more support alongside it. Or, as I said earlier, that they're working with me, we're doing this structured approach, and then at some point, 3 months in, 6 months in, whatever it is, that's where they realize, hey, I want to do this other thing. And so with recovery and how I'm working with people, typically there is more structure in place where we do have very clear goals of, okay, this is what you're focusing on right now, or this is the meal plan that you're using right now, with the caveat of, like, this is a minimum. You have my complete blessing and my encouragement to go above this, but this is your minimum. And I want to have these very clear goals where it can then be obvious of, am I doing this or am I not doing this? I think there can be, while I said in the beginning that going all in can remove a lot of the ambiguity, I think that can be true if someone starts to do it and they are actually doing it. Otherwise, you can get into this very gray area where actually I'm not really following anything and there's no real structure to this at all. And so really for me, it's like setting some minimums and then encouraging people to go above that. And when I say minimums, it's not some really tiny, small amount. Like we're setting minimums that are going to lead to meaningful changes. I also have a really big focus as part of the work that I do on coping strategies and helping people to understand how to regulate their nervous system, how to deal with certain thoughts and feelings as they arise, how to be able to challenge myself so that I am starting to go out and eat with people, or I'm eating earlier than I used to, or I'm challenging all these rules and being really explicit about that and doing it in a fairly structured way. And a structured way doesn't necessarily mean slowly. It just means, again, we're clear about, okay, what's actually going on. The one area I will say that I will typically go, quote unquote, all in with people is connected to exercise and really encouraging a fairly cold turkey cessation of exercise. Again, this isn't always the case, but it is a lot of the time. I've done a whole episode on exercise where I talk about that specifically and in more detail. So if you want to listen to that, it's episode 322. And I will put that in the show notes. And the reason I'm going through all this as well is, yes, eating disorders clearly have a biological component. And as I've said, so much of it is down to being in this lower energy state. And really acknowledging that there is complexity to all this. It's not just that, or for the vast majority of people, it's not just that. And I also just don't want to be in this all or nothing mindset with recovery, where you're either doing it this way or you're not doing recovery at all, because I just really don't believe that is true. And yes, I feel that there is a tendency for people to be doing things that aren't actually helping their recovery. And they're busy with things that, even when they do them, aren't leading them anywhere meaningful. And so, yes, I want to nip that in the bud, and I want to say, hey, let's change that piece of this. But the idea that if you're not doing all in, you're not doing recovery, I just can't get on board with that, because I just don't believe that to be true. And so, are there times where I wouldn't recommend going all in? I don't necessarily think so. Like, I was trying to think about this before I hit record. Is there a time where I'd say I would want to try and talk someone out of this? And I can't think that I would. If someone wants to do it, yeah, I want them to go for it, and just manage expectations connected to this. Like, this is what I expect you to see in terms of changes. These are the areas that I don't expect to see changes. These are where I think you will notice some challenges. These are where I believe it makes it easier than other approaches to recovery. And so having someone know all of the details, so that in a sense they're making an informed choice. There's informed consent, because they're going into it with eyes wide open, as opposed to this sunshines and rainbows belief connected to it. And so really the final takeaways for you with this would be, I think all in can be a very powerful approach in terms of how it can heal the body from a physical standpoint, and even from a mental, emotional standpoint, because of how story follows state, and the state that you're in has an impact on your thoughts and feelings and sensations. So I do think it can be very powerful, and it does cut through so much of the ambiguity, and it is very sort of direct in that way. And I don't think it's the only way. I think there are many different ways of doing recovery. I would like to see more people taking this approach, if I'm being truthful, because I do see that too many people, from my perspective, are trying the other end of the spectrum of, how do I do this in the least quick way? How do I do this in the way that gives me the least amount of worry or anxiety? And the problem is, if you're asking the question of what's going to create the least amount of anxiety today, the eating disorder is going to raise its hand and say, hey, I've got a load of stuff that I would suggest will help with this. And so I really want the shift to be, what are the things that are going to make it most supportive for my recovery? And for many people, all in is the answer to that question, with the caveat that we need to be layering on these other things. We need to be layering on coping skills. We need to be looking at all of these other areas that are then connected to the eating disorder, that predate the eating disorder, that are co-occurring conditions, etc., because it's not just all biological. So if all in works for you, like, amazing, like, have at it. And if it doesn't, that doesn't mean that you can't do recovery, or you'll never fully recover, or anything along those lines. It just means you need to take a different approach. And so based on this, I've got a couple of journaling prompts that may be useful just to reflect on with your recovery and the approach that you're taking, whether that is you're doing this on your own, whether that's you're working with someone, but just starting to have a look at what you're doing. And as I said at the beginning, we can define all in different ways. Like, there is the standard way that it is being defined, as I've gone through in this podcast. But you could also take the approach of, hey, all in just means me doing as much as I can possibly for my recovery. So the journaling prompt connected to this would be, what would going all in look like for me if I considered my needs and my capacity, and the fact that I'm wanting to recover from an eating disorder and do that in the quickest possible way. The next one would be, where am I still bargaining with the eating disorder, or where am I making eating disorder appeasement choices? And then the next question would be, what support do I need to move forward in a sustainable way? Because I really don't believe that people should be doing recovery on their own. And I understand that certain people find themselves in that position because there isn't the resources that they can find, or they don't have the financial means to be able to work with someone. And so I really understand that piece. And so even if it means that I can't afford to work with a coach or work with someone, what is the support that you can be able to get access to at this point? What resources can you get access to? What friends, family, whatever it may be. And again, I know that certain people are much more limited in this way, but we can start to redefine by what we mean by support here. And again, it's support for you. And so with all the constraints and limitations, what is the most amount of support you can be getting with this? So that's it for this episode. As I said at the beginning, this idea is coming up a lot in terms of going all in. I do think it's more hit the mainstream, and more people are aware of it. More people are considering it when thinking about recovery. And so I hope that this episode has given you some nuance with this, and it's looked at it from a number of different angles. If you do want help with your recovery, as I said at the top, I'm currently working with or taking on new clients to work with. If you want to reach a place of full recovery, whether that is going all in or not going all in, I would love to help you with that. So send an email to info@7-health.com and just put coaching in the subject line, and I can send over the details. All right, that is it for this week's episode. I'll catch you again next week. Until then, take care, and I will see you soon.